dad of Mayor, and came to moved here when I was 18. So we have family connections, Hadlow down. Anyway, so, and I don't normally come out to speak to them if you want me to come. And I've got a big garden and lots of family and pottery, but I looked at this organisation and I thought that looks really interesting. So, and I'm finding it really interesting. So I will try and pick up some of the things that you can see. So thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour, try and do it in about 10 minutes about Wychford pottery, which I founded in 1976 with my wife. And then I see that this talk is it's over 22nd day. Oh, that's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? But it's called Primitive Techniques of the 21st Century. And we're going to talk about Anagama, if I can work this. Does anyone know where this is? So I'm going to stand here somewhere. Yes, you're quite right. So it's not quite in Sussex, is it?
No.
But it's not far away. So when you see me in these hands, these are trained in the South of England tradition. Because I was apprenticed at Wrexham, which was founded by potters in the 1870s. I think I was there during its centenary, though they marked it in any way. But before that, they'd been itinerant potters, and they were the fourth generation of settled potters who trained me. And I took to how they worked like that towards team, repetition, making flower pots. My mum's a great gardener, I've always played with flower pots in the shed. And they taught me a throwing technique, which is as good as any other throwing techniques anywhere in the world. I mean, there are various different ones, but this one is particularly good at big way. So if I go to Japanese pottery or Moroccan pottery or anywhere, pick up all the clay, put it on the wheel, within 10 seconds they're going in Japan. That's what we do. Anyway, I also started clay very young because my story is that I had a clay pit when I was 6, but unfortunately my elder sister is sitting here. So she will tell me that I took over her clay pit inside of a Saxon ditch in unbelievably actually. Anyway, so I've always played with clay, and I was lucky enough to train at Wrexham. And I have this amazing technique which I've taught to other people, which enables me, here I am slightly younger than now, you can see making big pots. And this was in the 70s, 76 I founded the pottery. By the 80s, there's lots of people making pots then, but they were all doing it in the Bernard Leach tradition essentially. Even Michael Cardew, who, as you know, started out as an earthenware maker, converted to stoneware. So there were very few people doing earthenware, which is the readily available clay in most of England, apart from down the West Country and a few places elsewhere. So here I am making earthenware flower pots, nothing to do with the Leach tradition. Working in a team, making utilitarian flower pots. There you go, that's our logo. And because of this technique, I was able to make anything I wanted to with it. And also it coincided with a time when the gardening industry was just getting going. So I had really an open field and was able to build up a business using an updated version of the Wrexham model. So for instance, if you come to the workshop, the clay room is downstairs. You put the clay in the lift or throw it upstairs, and you work upstairs and move the pots along towards the kiln. They dry over the kiln, you drop them through a hatch into the kiln. So you've got that kind of circular motion, and you make upstairs. That's just the way it was done in the 19th century in England. If you're in Crete or somewhere, you can make them outside. In England, you work upstairs, overuse the kiln. So the other thing is I work with a team. I'm the head of the team. So very quickly, if you're making big pots, you need to move them around. Also, Wrexham works as a team. I like working as a team. And we've usually got about 20 makers and 50 people doing shops and sales and admin. So about 10 to 12 throwers, couple of people on hand pressed, 2 or 3 decorators, 3 people in the clay room packing. So we make about 5 tons of raw clay a week. We refine the clay ourselves, which is why I know about filter presses. We buy clays in. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of the sort of the background. So I've always been sort of not at odds, but at variance with how other potters have seen pottery. And there's always been a slight sort of tension there. I've got a lot of friends, but we're not quite sure how to handle each other. And it's sometimes uncomfortable that, because we make too many to be of interest to gatherers, for instance. So we are competing directly with machine-made or Chinese imports. Imagine having to sell 5 tons of pots a week to the garden centres. We've been to the garden centre recently. Pricing pots, it's very hard work. But another part of, I'm going to carry on looking, I'll go on to a bit more of that. I'll just come back to the sort of, well, I'll finish it, sorry. So, I mean, a major part of my philosophy is that where I work, which is only one way of seeing the crafts, because what is painting off is just from this evening, because you can see it from so many different aspects. I'm not saying my way is right in any way, but it is, because it's the way I do it, I will talk about that. And the crafts as employment, the crafts as a way of creating community. And this seems to me highly relevant. I mean, if you've got this leaflet here, which is just, I'll talk about later, the question I'm asking that is, what is the relevance of pottery in the 21st century? Well, my answer to this, there are many other answers in this room, but my answer is, well, it's a way of building up community. It's a way of giving employment in that community. And that's always been a very important part of craft. And it's a way which I will always speak up for. Okay, so I'm working within the tradition. I make flower pots. Say flower pots are very sort of, you know what the shape of flower pots is. And you can get a Roman times to find that shape. You know, it's easy to have that shape because you can turn them upside down and the plant falls out and you can repot it. And the earth can expand in the frost. It doesn't fall apart like a milk bottle with milk inside. There's nowhere for it to go. If you've got a shoulder pot, it tends to split. But this is just an example of what we would do with a traditional thing. This is a rhubarb forcer, which actually are only traditional since about 1836 approximately, when the gardener, the Chelsea Physic garden asked for a drain to be dug during the winter. Obviously a bit of trouble with his cottage. And the drain diggers shoved the earth on top of his rhubarb patch, which he wasn't too pleased about. And when he came to take the earth away in the early spring, he discovered that the rhubarb had all gone pink. And he took it home to his wife and cooked it, and it was sweet. And so he realised that if you force rhubarb, if you keep it from the light, it'll go pink. And they went to the local potters and they made rhubarb forces. And that's where they come from. This is a rhubarb force. But you can see we've done various things. We put a rather Chinese little hat on it because they're very practical to throw. It's quite different from the traditional hat. And we've got a roulette on it. And the roulette is put through a banded slip. So this is, as far as I know, never been done before. So it's an invention of mine where you paint on, probably like you can see, this rather nice grey colour which goes with that, it's a coloured slip. And then you carved a roulette. Well, there are a very few carved roulettes from the 19th century, very simple leaf patterns. Well, I see very rare, but occasionally I've seen it. But if you go back to the 7th century BC, I've done a lot of work in museums, you can see that the Cycladic people and around that time had, I think they were probably cylinder seals, and they would decorate like cylinder seals, or I've turned them into roulettes, which is, anyone know what a roulette is? Imagine a cogwheel on a handle, and if you offer it up to the pot, as it goes around one time, you'll get a series of little lines. Okay, so instead, well, you just told it like that. But imagine a clay cogwheel, and you carve a pattern into it. You can't see, but there's a sun, and moon, various bits of sort of plough, and there's a little, up there's a hill near me with a tumble on top, called Braille's Hill. That's the local landscape. In a roulette, in grey, on a very utilitarian old pot, but brought up to the 21st century. Oh, there you go. See, there's Braille's Hill, there's the moon, there's the sun. And there's the roulette. Okay, so you work with a team, you build up a community, and you take your tradition and you take it by the scruff and you shake it and make it go forward. If you do the same thing as been done before, it doesn't work. You've got to, the only point of the tradition is if you're moving it forward. If you're doing the same thing, no good. You've got to do something new. You've got to use your knowledge of what's come before to move forward. So see, I've never really been to any pottery shows. What I did was 26 years at Chelsea, so I'll just nip through. You can see we're having fun with colour. Sort of carpets. These are all old Chelsea in the 90s. Used to do lots and lots of fun things. That's all imported from New Zealand. They're all New Zealand plants, if that makes any year. We had fun. And more recently, that was just before Christmas in Blenheim Palace, very fancy American conceptual artist whose name I can't remember, and we made the pots for her. And that's comes to another thing. So where do we sit in relation to the craft world? So we're making a traditional product, we'll make a rhubarb forcer or a long tom, or anything that's been made for a few generations, because they're utilitarian, still used by gardeners. We will give it a new twist. Well, what else do we do? Well, one of the things we do is we work for conceptual artists. So if anyone went to Helen Martin's prize-winning Turner Prize, she won the Turner Prize last year or the year before, about 25–30% of her objects were made which were pottery. So we will get a CAD drawing and work with her on different glazes, which she usually buys in, sometimes we'll make them up. And we will do sculptures for her or bits of things, she makes them up. So this is the exact opposite of what you were talking about the potters looking at the clay. Or it was the painters, so the painters never think of where the paint comes from. But of course, in our culture, we don't really think it's important where the paint comes from. We don't really think it's important how the stuff's made, or indeed what it's made of. I'm not getting at her because she's a really good artist and I really enjoy working with her. And she's got a fantastically interesting 3D visual imagination, so she's really good to work with. She's a very good client. There's things in the kiln at this moment for her. But as an idea that the material would inform the design, that's not really where we've been going in the last 30 or 40 years. Not at all. So I'll just have a look and see where I'm going next, because I think I'm just about to get started to the next one. Because of course in here what you have, we've got the three elements in ceramics, which is material, process, and concept. Well, Helen obviously starts off with concept, and she says, oh, Jim could do that for him out of clay. And I don't really mind what the process is as long as it is shaped and cut. It's a process first. I'm sorry, the concept first. Go to Japan. The sort of potters I work with, it's the exact opposite. You start off with your material, you know the material, you know the process, and they suggest the design. The design comes out of your knowledge of the material and the process. Okay? Now, I'm going to wind back a bit because this is one aspect of craft in Japan. Craft in Japan is extremely complex, and I know a little bit about it. But essentially, you could say 150 years ago, approximately, suddenly the West arrives in Japan, smashes the economy, as we did so charmingly in so many places in the 19th century, so that it can get in on the trade. You get Netsuke being sold in London, everyone's Japanese crazy, but it's all really cheap because, frankly, the economy's going to last. But the craftsmen, what are they going to do? Because the old system was that crafts have been very well thought of because they've been used to, like in medieval courts in Europe, they've been used to show off to visiting people how good your valley was. And each valley and each area in Japan has different claims, so you can make different stuff just using the local materials. And they were very much that valley made like this. They had very strong traditions, When the West arrives, everything goes to particles. And there are two distinct ways that in the early 20th century and through the 20th century this was reacted to, or three ways. The first was that Japanese came to England, went to Stoke or Dresden or wherever, copied the machinery, and decided that all the porcelain in Imola and Alitown places could easily be made by machine. And they just got the machinery from Stoke-on-Trent and converted very quickly their production of fine porcelain, for instance, which you can make on a machine very easily because it's turned to that kind of precision. They converted it and started flooding our market with things that we thought we made. Of course, we got them originally from the Orient. Okay, so that's the industrial process. So that's another pressure on the craftsmen, the actual hand makers. So then another thing that comes to the West is this idea of an artist. An artist, a studio potter. You don't have to make it like your valley. Don't you know what they make over there? Just buy some of that clay and well, it can't be this colour. You can buy any colour. Oh my. So the whole world's your oyster. You can design it how you want. You are the centre of the design. It's not your valley, it's not your tradition. Just do what you want. Okay, so that's the so funnily enough, that's where Yamada and Mashiko, that's what that tradition, I'm caricaturing it slightly, with Bernard Leach and Hamada. There was a third way though, and that was that you could decide, well, what is it to make pots in my valley? Because, hell, what is it? I mean, we've been sleepwalking for the last 400 years, so we've had a closed market, we've had no trade agreements. I mean, no trade allowed. So it's okay. We can just, as long as we got a home market, that's fine, we needn't worry about it. And what they did is they said, well, the best pots were made, whatever it was, 400 years ago, so we're going to actually go and dig up the kilns. The potters went, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, they were digging up their own kiln sites. So I've been to places, old boys, and they got what their fathers dug up, or what they dug up sometimes, in an old cabinet next to their wheel. I said, okay, well, if that's our model, Which, take the Reclamation tradition, I've shaped it around a bit, added a few things. You know, I've travelled in Europe and the Middle East and looked at museums, put all those into a melting pot, and you come up with something a bit different enough anyway. So they've done the same thing. They've shaken up their tradition, but they're still very much orientated to their valley. Now, there's another similarity, because of course, if you're orientated to the valley, you know everyone in the valley. It's probably your father did it, your grandfather did it, you know, eighth generation is nothing in Japan for the potters. You know, now we're on the second generation, but they're on the 8th generation frequently. So pottery is part of the social structure. It's how the village is orientated. You know, in Bizen there's 400 potters. 400. Bizen's the size of Lewis. 400 full-time potters. And 10% of them are on serious money. So, you know, and that's just one centre in Japan. There's 32,000 full-time potters in Japan. Last time anyone tried to count. That's not to say that they don't have problems. That's not to say that their school in Bizen is like in Denmark, finding it difficult to fill the spaces. Okay, so I'm just trying to give you a bit of background. Okay. That was Bizen, incidentally. When I arrived, the other thing that happened, you arrive in Bizen, and there's all this stuff. I've never seen this before. All my mates who work in the Burma League tradition, they've never told me about this stuff in Japan. Because it's not glazed. Nothing in Bizen is glazed. And they fire it in these kilns. Well, I can't go on too much about this, but I've done a lot of research into the Yamagama history. The Japanese don't like history. It's not just, they just don't think in historical terms. They make up everything. You know, there's a lot of myth about it. Yamagama stopped being used most places. Bizen was the last place to stop using it because they're unglazed. For glazeware, an Yamagama kiln, you light the fire here for a few days. It's just an open chimney. After it's hot enough here, you start poking wood in through the side, and after you've poked about the third one, it's so hot here, and it's getting hot there, that all the heat you initially built up starts rolling up. It takes a kiln this size about probably 24 hours to roll up, so the heat's rolling. By the time you're at the end, you close down the front for 12 hours. And you can have them 3 times the length of this building. Then it takes a couple of months to fire. I mean, there's a bloke, Mori-san, who has one which is 110 metres long. It takes him 2 months to fire. Yeah, up a hillside. Okay, but the trouble is that the flames all come from one way, and if that's glazed, anyone ever done it, you know, in your gas kiln, if it's too near the flame, it all blisters, and you know, you can tell which side. It's not always very nice for glaze. But for unglazed ware, it doesn't matter. So they kept them going in Bizen until about 1880, when they converted for various reasons, probably because of economic problems, because of the opening of the market, and they converted to Noborigama, which are less directional than flat. This man here on the left, this is up in June, and patron of the Oxford Yamagama project, was, when he was a young man, clearing the hillsides about 1960, 62, 3, with his father, and they came across the ruins of an old Yamagama which hadn't been used for about 80 years, and they said, we'll rebuild it. His father then died before they fired it, and he and his brother relearned how to fire Yamagama kilns. We don't know whether it was fired. It's a made-up, reinvented. I've done various archaeological work with that. You're looking down a kiln, and that is Bizen City. You see, very Japanese. I mean, it's flat, as a main road, and a Shinkansen high-speed railway going through there, and that's it. Very ugly. looking up. And to cut a long story short, we started, I had this crazy idea of building some kilns in Oxford, because I thought, how do you broaden out the interest in and discussions about ceramics? Oxford's a place for discussion. It's a place where you can get people together. If I did it at Whitchford, it's a bit Whitchford orientated. Let's have it at a place which is universal, like Oxford University. This is my version of a medieval anagama kiln, which will basically, there's a willow basket under that, would have been bamboo, and cover it with straw mats, but here it's just SE. And you put clay on, big pot, take the basket out and fire. And it works extremely well. I start falling down now. I've cheated a bit, used a few bricks. And there it is getting finished. We put some made it into a drag out for fun. I also built a more modern version. That works extremely well, that kiln. A more modern version. Here's Kaz, who's my new Japanese potter, and Taku, who's the kiln builder. And here's a more sophisticated brick one, which actually works considerably less well. There's a problem with fire. That's looking through, actually, is Jun's kiln. That's looking through our first kiln fire. And here's the inside of the kiln. I'm just going to go through very quickly. There's a few things I want to say. If you're thinking of I'm just going to show you a few of the effects. Remember, none of these have any glaze on them. Why was I interested in these air pots? Well, I don't really know about glaze. I make flower pots, for goodness sake. I do sculptural things. Glazes are a bit complicated, like chemistry. I know a bit about them, but frankly, not my style. So, all of these, okay, just look at the different effects. These are all raw clay when they went in the kiln. Okay? Same kiln. Okay. That will mean that it comes out in a particular way, like that. So that's high temperature raki called Tikudashi. So you can see the different range of colours. These are all fired in the same kiln. I admit there's one or two cheats of an ash glaze inside that one. But otherwise, I find that absolutely fascinating.
You're not made of the same clay?
No, they are some different clays. There are different clays there. Yeah. They are in different positions of the kiln. This one is buried in a kiln trench. This one is very near the front. That's a more general one. And you can see some examples here. I'm just going to very quickly, these are some flower pot shapes. I do sculptural stuff as well. This is by Kaz. So Kaz, he's 30, well, is he an artist or is he working in a Byzantine tradition? He's really conflicted. It's very, very interesting working with him. And as I say, of his generation, there are very, very few potters now in Japan. There are very, very few craftsmen in Japan. The crafts, where they've had such an amazing craft tradition, boosted, I may say, by losing very heavily to the Americans in the Second World War, has become an American colony since then, essentially. And how can you be respectively Japanese when you're occupied by the foreign power? Culturally, you become Japanese. The tea ceremony became important. Pottery is the main thing in tea ceremonies, very highly priced. Collecting ceramics was very, very popular. But that's all going now. Japanese food's prepared on lots of dishes, but women work now, so they haven't got all day to prepare the food. So there's a real crisis. Also, discipline was very strong, and the young people didn't do it. So people like Kaz are trying new things. These are some other pieces I made just out of the kiln the other day by me. I'm just going to go very quickly through. That's loading the kiln. You can see it's quite complex. I was just thinking in the car coming down, I mean, I will give you lots of practical advice on how to build kilns, and I've got a suggestion. But one of the problems with this is that because it is so process orientated, right, and that this is the process. This is the process. It's not glazing. It's knowing where the flame goes in the kiln, how imagining as you pack the kiln what effect you're going to get on that clay in that position, fired on that side, or are you going to drop wood through the kiln or through the roof onto it, or are you going to bury it in a pit? It's therefore quite difficult. If you imagine loading a storage kiln, you've got a gas kiln, so you fire it reasonably well, maybe a slight cool spot there and a hot spot there, but essentially, as long as everyone's done their glazing and decided what it's going to look like, you put it in the kiln, fire it, and they'll come up, roughly speaking, as long as the technician's got it right, how they want. Here, actually loading the kiln is how it's going to look. So that's quite difficult, isn't it? Because, hang on, I want that prime play. Oh, no, I want it. I don't want that place where I'm not going to get much work done. It's quite difficult loading this kiln. How do you learn how to load it when you can see it's a long tunnel? You've got to run up the steps to the far end. There's a little door at one end. It's not very comfortable there. You certainly can't have 3 or 4 people standing up. You can maybe just about get 2 people side by side. It takes 5 days to load. So those kilns are quite impractical in that way. I can give you a kiln I built at Whitchford where you take the lid off, it's just slabs, and you could learn on that. But I think that's something to be thought about. It's so process orientated. I don't want to discourage you because I think it's a really good idea to build them, and they're really exciting. This last kiln, I found a lot of large pieces in. So this last kiln, the kiln before, I think we had well over 200 people working it. And it took me 5 days to load and nearly killed me. And this time we had only about 100 people, lots of big pieces of mine. So I'll show you those. Lots of things going on. I'm going out to Bizen in a fortnight. I'm at the end of a 2-year programme with Bizen City Council, sponsoring me and some of my potters to go over and make English flower pots in Bizen kilns. They're desperate. It's the kind of senior, most Japanese of Japanese pottery, Bizen. Very austere, very unstated. The first time my wife saw a catalogue of Bizen pots, she said, "What are these shit pots?" She's got slightly less food luck recently, but they are very dour in some ways. So they're trying to work out what the next step is. So they asked, and anyway, these are flower pots planted up by one man. You can see you get interesting straw mats. It is fun firing these kilns. If you don't mind, doing it 24 hours a day for somewhere between 6 and 10 days.
Oh, sorry.
That's how you start that. I think probably that amount of wood times 6 to fire. It's about somewhere over 20 tons. But these are the pots that came out. Some of the pots that came out of it. So I'm just. The other thing, very quickly, because I must be over time right now. If you've got this process, you've got these clays, okay, I've said that you need to do all these things. So what would I personally do? Having just about, I'm a reasonably fast learner. I've been a potter for 40-something years, nearly 40 years when I came across this process, so I thought, okay, it takes me 5-6 years to learn. I mean, 3 years, 4 years firing Anagama kiln, so I'm just beginning to get the hang of it, with that backlog of experience. So what would I make? I can make a tea bowl, obviously. That's what Japanese make. or I can make a sake flask, or I can make a square box. But what would I make with this process? So the answer I came up with, because for various reasons, is a series called the 5 elements. What's the 5th element? Anyone know? Not, it must be good film. What? A good film. Who knows the name in English of the 5th element? Oh, this is really interesting. This is another whole lecture. So the point is that until about 1600, everyone would have known the answer in an educated audience, because it is the quintessence. The fifth essence, the 5th thing. It's ether. It is the conjoining principle. It's the archetype that contains everything and is contained within everything. It's the joining principle. It's what you could say it's called God or something, but let's keep away from that. It is the fact that you can't work in one element. We can't work in one area without it affecting all other areas. Atomic physics now understands this. String theory, all these different theories, flapping a butterfly's wing and it affects the whole universe. That's the principle. In the 1600s, for various reasons, which I won't get into about alchemy and stuff, we decided that we can't measure that, so we'll throw it out. But that enables us to split the other elements up. So, end of lecture. You can see that our communal not understanding of having lost sight of the archetype of overall unity for 400 years has had really drastic effects. Okay, so this is going off to Japan, this sculpture. So it's earth, water, fire, air. Air's fired upside down. So Kaz, who taught me how to fire these things, so you can't do that. So, but I can do that. I could have done it more had I had more confidence in what I was doing, and that grey would have come right down there. So I would have actually, and this water would have been coming out of the embers. That would have been buried in the embers, and I would have got even more of the effect of which I associate with the sky. I'm using different clays there. Here's earth, and a very unrefined clay. I'm going to talk to you technical stuff if you want later. There's water with porcelain inlay. Porcelain does nothing in these kilns, just occasionally a bit pink. So it's very useful for inlay. There's fire, sorry. It's actually amazing. It's really good. Mirror there as well. That's another. We're near the Rollite Stone Circle, so that's no longer witness. And these very quickly are other pieces. But this is, you can see that these are all shapes which are going to catch the flame. You can orientate them. They're like boats. The flame and water are very similar. So when you're packing a kiln, if like me, you spent a lot of time in mountain rivers in your youth, it's very, very useful because flame essentially is like water going backwards. So you just can imagine the flame, how it's going to go over these shapes. This pot is here, if you want to go and look at it. Those are inlaid ones again, and that's the final picture again. So my last question would be, why is anyone interested in anagama these days? And I would say it is because it is, that sort of word primal. It's very, very simple. You take, the best results come from unrefined clay, because all the impurities give interest. And it's the kind of ware you're making which doesn't matter about impurities. You can see the process on it. And actually doing the process, there's not very much to it. I can teach you how to wood fire in a moment, but all the packing, the length of it, it becomes a very visceral, emotional experience. And that direct contact with the elements is something, I mean, all gardeners know it, but it's something we need, and people are becoming increasingly interested. And I would also just like to just finish with the idea of efficiency. I run, you heard, every day, this morning, I can't tell you what I have to do. I'm in a tough market where we're just arguing with the National Trust because they take one of my designs and have it made in Indonesia. The National Trust, for Christ's sake. So I obviously have to know about efficiency, and I use gas kilns and electric kilns. They're a nightmare, but that's something else because they're always going for the computers. I was saying to Topsy that if you buy a controller for Kiln, the next generation is going to be touch screen. I mean, as a potter, do you want a touch screen? Okay, so, and if you go, it's considered clever to do ceramics with 3D printing. And I'm not saying I'm completely against it, because everything, pros and cons. But if we carry on with efficiency, where did the Industrial Revolution start? Oh, it started with Josiah Wedgwood, and he made ceramics efficient. But a lot of people are, what? And we're now carrying on a technological revolution. That's efficiency. I mean, it's madness. Why do we want to be efficient? Although I've got nothing against Joe Finch, he's a really good kiln designer, but I would question why you want fast fire wood kilns. Why do you want the efficiency? I know, this morning I knew exactly why I needed efficiency. I've got to keep the costs down, But, sitting here, we need to question why we want efficiency. Less wood, but we don't mind how much Russian gas we use. We can grow the wood. We can see where it's growing. We can cut it ourselves. We don't actually need anything very much. So the anagama is the simplest form of high temperature kiln. It's just a chimney laid on the ground. It's upright, doesn't go very hot. If you lie it down, it goes hotter. And because it's hotter, you get the marks from the ash starts to melt. At the lower temperatures, you don't get all those effects, but at the high temperatures, you get all those effects. And it's a very simple process. And if you think of what happens in efficiency, what's actually happening is let's be a bit Marxist about it, it's capital really having its way. Who is benefiting from the fact that everyone, the poorest person in the world now has a mobile phone? I mean, it's meant to be absolutely marvellous for the poor people who have a mobile phone, but in actual fact, what percentage of their income? Those people that's all going to a very central source. From a very clever way of income collecting for that central source. And I think we need to really think of technology. It's not that friendly, as we know from all the Google things and all that kind of stuff. And anagama is the exact opposite of that. It is ultra inefficient. So I stand for ultra inefficiency in that little corner. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Because you've got to get away, I just thought maybe we should just get straight on to some questions quickly, although not ultra efficiently. Anybody got some inefficient?
Sorry, a bit rambling, but
whatever questions.
I've got one. In that one of the photographs, there was Venus and codes.
you want to
No, just because.
Get thinking. It's just, you know, I mean, obviously I think a great deal, but you have to trust your intuition on a process like this, because otherwise it's, you know, sort of nightmare. Tell yourself it not.
Do you feel that building the antique film in Oxford was kind of partly community building? You can bring people together?
We did use a lot of volunteer stuff, yes. Yeah, which has its pros and cons. Which are? I work hard. I work fast. When I want a brick passed, I want it passed.
You found the community were
if you're paying someone and you say, come on, where's the bloody brick? They, run to it. If you say that to a volunteer, they get really uptight. There's only 2 honest. But on the other hand, they're really good and they bring a great deal of, and for firing, there's some of the volunteers are absolutely reliable. Personally, I prefer if someone's giving a lot of time. I don't like the idea because it's such fun on craft. I don't have to pay anyone. I really object to that. Emma Bridgewater's factory burnt down the other day.
really.
She is on 0 hours bloody contracts, which means that the insurance company will not pay any of her workers. You've got to be really careful these days. I mean, and she's I know quite a lot about her. She's made lots of money. I mean, to me, that's why I say art is a job, and you don't do things like that to your crops. And it's the same. It's the only trouble with the volunteer side. If I could sell those, I'd sell them for a lot of money. I'm still considerably in the red on the project, so I need to sell them some money. But ultimately, if you've got professionals putting work in and volunteers firing it, you can sense that there might be, some grey area there. Free labour. I mean, if you go and work for the National Trust as a volunteer, you don't get paid. So there's and the professional potters have to make money out of the work they put in. There's not enough in pottery to just not. If you make a piece, you've got to get some money for it if it comes out the first. Otherwise, you don't make it. Not in this country. But again, you've got to sort that one out.
Do you feel like you've completed the Anagram project, or is it like maybe just a learning chapter, or where as a project?
Well, I'm going out to Japan in a couple of weeks to talk to Japanese because it's an Anglo-Japanese project, so it's not just me.
In the sense that you don't know what will come from that, or you're talking about various things that will come from it, or?
Well, I think it could go in various different directions. I mean, there's a lot of interest. And I think smaller kilns,
in different places, or?
There's a lot of interest from different volunteers and organisations like this. I mean, I do recommend Anagama firing. It is extremely exciting and engrossing, and when you get an eye in, you can read the fire. So, this. I can read it. I can tell that not much is happening there. Okay, so that was masked from the flame. So it must have been either against something or laid down. Oh, and there's a red mark on it, so that means there was some rice straw across it, or you can use reeds. Okay, so it was laid down or against it. So, there's a lot of stuff here. So I should say it's probably laid down and fairly masked there. It was laid down, very heavy ashing there. So the fire was coming from there. And look, over here, it was wrapped in straw. I can see the straw going right round, Here it's brown, there it's red, and here it's actually become this white part of the glaze. So this is a natural glaze which is coming on. Yes, yeah, a little bit there, caught there. So the flame, there's the flame coming like that. So you can come and have a look at that later and see for yourself. And that kind of ability to read, this one here, totally different colour. Nothing much happening there, but if I turn it over, it's got this mark here. So that very good glaze there. So I now know, because I know the process, this is grey because it was buried in one of the ash pits. The wood was falling on top of it for hours, completely buried in embers. Got very hot because that's properly melted ash. Extremely hot ember pile, and it was on a pad of clay, somewhere in the bottom of the embers. And here it's a bit higher, but there must have been a space there under there where the air could get really hot, and it's melted the ash there. So that's quite unusual. They what? All raw. Yeah. And this is one, you'd have to look at this in good light, but this has got extraordinary kind of metallic finish on the inside, so that was pulled out at top temperature from right in the front of the kiln and put in sawdust, or hay, I should say, put in hay. And the big ones have got a lot of ash deposits on it again from
What time do you open it up at then? When you open it up, if it's hot, it's going to hot at the back of it. So when do you choose to put it? How long do you have to wait to open the kiln up?
as long as you file it for 10 days.
10 days. And it'll be hot as you go further into it.
It can get pretty sweaty up the top end if you don't they get cold. Yeah. It's nice on a cold day, not so good on the summer. Oh, you just leave it for another couple of days.
Yeah.
David.
I was going to ask a question about the other raw material. You mentioned passing was the 20 tonnes of wood that went into the firing. To what extent does the type of wood, the hardwood, softwood, roundwood, slabwood, bark on, bark off, do you have any control over that? Is this something that you experimented with, or is there any tradition that goes along with that?
Well, it's got to be dry. I mean,
is it just fuel?
Different woods have different calorific values, obviously. They have different lengths of flame. So it's one of the things you can play around with. But as a good general wood, good pine is, in this country, is the best, in my opinion, for as a general wood. You put some hardwood in. Hardwood it depends how much ember you want to build up, depends what length of flame you want, what temperature the kiln is at. So it's a very nice variable. So if you've got a good wood pile with different woods in it, different sizes of wood, a different diameter of wood, you can. That's one of the ways you think. One of the things you have to learn.
I was thinking about the inclusions within the bark or within the timber of the minerals which create the ash glazing effects.
Yeah. Yes. So there's lots of people who love, getting bonfires of particular ash and making ash glazes out of them. So they do all have different properties, yes. But the way I'm finding out, again, when I'm mixing wood, so I just get a general wood ash, which is usually about the same. And I'm using the wood, just because I think it needs a bit more heat, a bit more strength to heat, or I want to take, I've built up strength heat, and I want that heat to travel up the kiln, so I put in little flamers of thin pine. If I wanted to build up, I put some oak at the front or something, not too much.
Down to like hazels and things like that to get them to sort down to.
Hazel, yeah. Hazel's a good wood. It's a lovely variable material. It's one of the things you can play with. But I'm really interested in the heat and getting the heat up rather than the effect of particular ashes.
Any more questions? I think it's coming up to 9:45 and I promise it will be finished by 9:30.
But I mean, the last thing I'd say is that ceramics are a particularly interesting craft, but what's so interesting about all the crafts is they're relevant in many different ways in our society. From the personal development, personal expression, to art therapy, which going on to education, obviously, a very, very, very important education. And the lack of any kind of glimmering of understanding in our government educational departments about that is deeply distressing. And finally, you could talk about epigenetics. So the idea, not everyone agrees with, but a lot of academics do agree with, is that Darwinian evolution doesn't happen over many eons, it happens over one generation. If you switch off those bits of the brain which, you can switch them off, they're switched off for the next generation. Together with actually Oxford academics who are rethinking the early development of the brain. When I was studying anthropology many years ago, it was assumed that we got cleverer, therefore we learnt how to use tools. It is now, the theory coming out, is that we got clever because we were using tools. In other words, the hand is what creates intelligence. We're not using our hands intelligently because we're intelligent. We are intelligent because we're using our hands. If you stop using your hands in any way other than on a keyboard, you're going to lose. Not only are you going to lose those abilities, but with epigenetics, you're going to turn off all those bits of the brain that you're activating by using your hands, which is not a good thought. And I will leave you with So craftsmen are important. And, sorry, I use craftsmen in the old-fashioned. Craftswomen are just as probably more important than craftsmen.